Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Mary Price. I'm the Events and Marketing Manager at the Shingo Institute at Utah State University. I'm excited to have Gwendolyn Galsworth with us today. She's a Shingo Faculty Fellow and author of several books. We published an article in our monthly newsletter just last week that talks more about the topic that we're discussing today. The article can be found on our website. Just go to shingo.org, click the media tab, and select the blog. You'll find the article there. It's called The Power of Visuality in Turbulent Times, an Opportunity for Shingo Principles. As a reminder, all of our monthly webinars can be found on our YouTube channel. You can access that also from our website. It's under the media tab and it's videos. And with that, I'll turn the time over to you, Gwen.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mary. I am really delighted to be here. I have a topic to share with you today that was surprisingly challenging for me to put together into a coherent framework for discussion, or at least for presentation, but I appreciated it so much. And so I'm going to begin and share with you my take on the turbulent times that we've had very recently, the power of visuality, and the opportunity for Shingo principles. I thank the Institute for giving me this opportunity as well. Thank you. So, get my controls. Here we go. There's a really interesting and well-worn Hindu proverb that goes like this: if nothing changes, nothing changes. And what I love about this saying is that if you reverse it, it is equally as interesting. In other words, nothing changes if nothing changes. COVID was like that. COVID didn't just change us, it changed our economy. COVID didn't just change me, it changed us. It changed us and the way that we think, and actually the way that we identify ourselves. And that's pretty much the anchor point for this discussion. I want to kind of build the scenario of COVID so that we have a framework of thinking. First, from the wide end view of the telescope, and that is COVID generated really fierce macroeconomic changes on a global scale in business, yes, but in whole societies, and not just in the United States or your country, but everywhere. There were widespread shutdowns, employee layoffs, leaves. In the United States in 2021, an estimated 10 million jobs remained unfilled. They were filled before COVID, they were unfilled in 21. And the supply chain disruptions were staggering, and they continue to this day. The charts say it all. I want you to notice the yellow line is China. That's what you call a government that controls its people. But these charts were very telling. They talked to us about the tragic loss of lives. They talked to us about joblessness, the loss of jobs. What you see on the screen right now is just during the first 3 to 4 months of COVID, the terrible declines. The joblessness surges one after another, after another, after another. Through the narrow end, if we reverse it and look closely, if we look at the people end of the impact of COVID, we see other points of view, other events, other data. Millions returned to work, but millions did not. And the reasons are pretty hard to nail down. Some took an early incentivized retirement. Some people still had COVID. Some people had the effects of COVID. It's called long COVID. You may have heard of it. Still others were just afraid of getting COVID. They just didn't want to leave their houses. All of this is understandable. Widespread and different reasons. Some employees felt more productive working remotely. They didn't want to go back. They had the proper technology, secure connections, clear expectations. They had the trust of their employers. Others shifted slightly and began to value their newfound independence, the control that they had over their time, and they liked it. They liked the flexible scheduling. They liked having that kind of internal space, that kind of privacy, if you will. When not given a choice, many returned to their companies, but many people left the workforce voluntarily. They left the so-called rat race. They had a choice, they felt they did, and they exercised it. They wanted to stay home, they wanted to make time for family, make that a priority for change. They wanted simply time for self-reflection. This was startling news to business and industry, where we had all been schooled to think that when we grow up, we'll have a job, we'll keep a job, we'll steadily continue to rise in that job, we'll continue to work, we'll build that momentum, we'll build that stability. Others left the workforce, but in order to work for themselves, they became their own boss. They entered the gig economy, or they started their own businesses. And interestingly, many of them were successful. Small businesses doing what they wanted to do, what, in a sense, their heart or their mind told them to do, and they were successful. They were in control. One way or the other, a very large group of people, not just in the United States, but everywhere, decided not to return to work. All right, so this is what I showed at the beginning, the marked differentiation between the money invested for recovery from the financial crisis and that which our governments invested to get us back on our feet, to get the economy back on its feet, to save the economy. But something else was going on. So the money part was really important. Of course it was, but there were also enormous waves of fear and anxiety and terrible loss all around the world, in your neighborhood and mine and everywhere. And it was tough. It was impenetrable. We didn't know what was happening. We didn't know what was coming next. It was, for many, terrifying. The tension, you could cut it with a knife. It was palpable. And it's the paradox of crisis that is of interest here, because in fact it will bring us to the topic of visuality, but in the indirect way that crises behave. On the outside, we are surrounded by circumstances over which we have zero control. We can exert some influence, but it's locally, and it is minute by comparison, and it's usually on a personal level. But what happens when the world, in a sense, the earth stands still, where we don't have that traffic, that societal contact, whether it's because of war, flood, or in this case, COVID, space opens. It's interesting that it should open because we are also very, very tense. COVID was a world level, colossal crisis. Space opened in us. And I'm not just talking about me and the people I know, but as a phenomenon, we saw that play out over the next 2.5, 3 years. Space opened on the inside. Yes, inside of people's houses, but also inside of them. And whole sectors of our society experienced a range of reversals, of inversions, of resets of private priorities during COVID and after COVID. And what happens on the inside of us, especially on the massive scale that COVID attained, represents a society-wide shift, but also a shift in the workplace. We are the inhabitants of the workplace, and we bring ourselves to the workplace. If we change, it changes, or it should, I should say, or it must. Even if we're no longer at work in a company, that workplace is going to change. There are other humans. And what my take on this is, we experienced a crisis in authority. COVID brought to a boil a crisis in authority that had been cooking for decades. I remember I grew up, I was a part of the 60s, and I know the kind of turmoil that happened then. And then there was the Vietnam War, and then there was the financial crisis, and then there were the Reagan years, and then there was this, and then there was that. But all the while, there was this internal connection that was being refashioned, and COVID brought it to a boil. COVID eroded our trust in practically everything, in government, the media, the police, our justice system. And ultimately, this is my assessment, I have there's some literature on this, if you will. We lost trust in what we call our way of life. I define our way of life as a set of principles and common practices, common beliefs and values that we willingly accept as universal and valid. They're kind of a foundation, but that changed in our society, in us, and inevitably in the workplace. Which way is the way? It was no longer clear. Our way of life was beginning to change and reshape itself. And what's so interesting about this is that COVID eroded our trust in practically everything, except, surprisingly, ourselves. Somewhere along the way, many of us began to use ourselves as a singular and increasingly reliable reference point. Now, I will say that this has been evolving for centuries, but it came to a boil in our lifetime. We became more authentic, more internally connected, more ourselves. And what happened is an explosion in diversity, both the diversity of content and its strength or its volume, its decibel level, a revolution of the self, of myself and yourself, thinking for ourselves, calculating solutions to age-old societal problems. But those solutions reflect a virulent diversity, as diverse as these people who came out of COVID, us. The solutions did not align. That wasn't the point at the time. They are not even remotely alignable. COVID brought us to that point. It brought us to a kind of brink of doom. We got through it. We lived to tell about it. And we announced that we survived COVID, that we were back, and we did it loudly. So what I'm saying is the nature, the complexion, the configuration of the individual during our lifetime, during the last 5 years, has changed radically. What's going on in the workplace? Has it kept up? The fact is, people have become, and I've seen it with my own eyes, in my own work, they've become their own authority, including at work. Yes, on social media, but including at work. This crisis in authority. For many companies, COVID has produced a reordering of the internal and external landscapes of our work and our persons, and the boundaries are blurred. Companies need a refit. They need a new fit. They need to become more fit for humans, and not just humans in a general class, but humans who often look and talk and think and feel not like us. Whoever you are, if you're a manager, a CEO, an operator, if you're in charge of purchasing, if you're out there selling, if you're simply a consumer, they're not like us anymore. Whoever the us is, okay? And that phrase has a particular inflammatory quality, not like us. So I want to talk now about the Shingo principles and visuality. There is a very nice fit between these. I'm going to go about it in a particular way. I'm sure you're all acquainted with the guiding principles, the 10 principles that are so important for the transformation of companies. The Shingo model has been, and the set of principles have been absolutely a rock foundation for companies attempting to make this change. They started it long before COVID, and they need to continue. because things have changed. Respect every individual takes on a new relevancy when we're in the midst of what is an authority crisis, where in fact positional authority doesn't really hold much sway. We're using ourselves as the measure. So respect every individual will be tested. And it's time for us to groom ourselves to the new reality that it really needs to be reactivated and, in a sense, redefined. The respect part, the individual part, and the every part. Now let's get to visuality in turbulent times. Effectively deploy, I'm going to make some declarations here. I've been in this field for over 3 decades, and this is what I practice every day. It's why I have moved to Europe in order to bring visuality to the companies here. So I'm making these declarations from that experience. Effectively deployed, visual workplace principles, practices, and methods build an environment that is designed and owned by the people who work there. They learn how to think visually. They learn this together, but they develop visual devices individually. I'll give you a taste of this in a moment. It will be a taste that I hope stimulates you to investigate further. Together, they individually build an embedded language of visual devices that is their own language. They let the workplace speak in a language that they recognize because it is their own. And the language of the visual workplace is devices. So I'm going to give you, this is a part of the conceptual base of visuality, and I think it will make the point, hopefully. There are two questions that drive the visual workplace. The first question is this: what do I need to know? And the whole question goes like this: what do I need to know that I don't know right now in order to do my work? We ask the question to ourselves, we answer the questions, and we turn the answers into visual devices, and then we pull them to us. We pull the device to us, we pull the device to us again. We gain control over our corner of the world. I want you to notice the I. This is a pivotal part of the sentence, and it is what I discovered in the 1980s didn't work. I couldn't get people to work as teams. They were too angry, and I started with operators. I now work extensively with senior leadership, executives, supervisors, of course, but I started here, and people sure did push back. And I had to disconnect the whole thing of teams. People didn't want to work together. They didn't like you, they didn't like your car, they didn't like your uncle, they didn't like your shirt. This is the United States, the land of entitlement, the land of judgment. And I was in the midst of it, trying to get people to change. So I said, okay, let's make it about you. And I did. And that I is the driver. When you see that I, that is the human will. What you care about, think, and do matters. What do I need to know? Now, these questions are useful. I'll get to the second question in a moment. Are useful, but they are not methodology, but they're an orientation to say, these devices are your inventions, your creations. Okay? What do I need to know? And you are right to say, hey, what about teams? Don't teams count? You will see teams in the second question. And the second question is, what do I need to share? What do I know that I need to share with you? What do I know that you don't know in order to do your work more safely, more completely, better quality? What do I need to share? We use a leverage point called motion, moving without working, in order to dig into that. But right now I want to focus on this I-driven quality of the visual workplace. Need to know, need to share, because that is a part of what is beginning to express itself in our new post-COVID world, the human will. The diversity in beliefs and attitudes and values of that will not only hold no negative sway in a visual workplace, at least as I do it, But a visual transformation is specifically designed to address that diversity and to absorb it without prejudice into a unifying whole. This is part of the glory of the journey, that people don't have to change. They're going to change their workplace. And as they change their workplace, they will change, but they're not going to have to give up their personal identity. Their personal identity will shift. That's the whole point. But it is not an outcome that is a requirement. It happens because they're inventing language through visual devices that is helping themselves. Equally, in a visual workplace, the shifting numbers in a workforce population, including seasonal workers, does not harm performance or production levels. We plan for it. The visual enterprise is intentionally and specifically designed to withstand and absorb such irregularities. You want that strength. You want to have stability in a crisis. So I want to talk about this from another point of view, that the environment that's becoming progressively transformed through visual functionality is one that absorbs the differences and uses it as fertilization, as the strength, the growing strength, nourishment for the development of the change. And in a real and practical sense, visuality operationalizes that foundational Shingo principle, create constancy of purpose. We are not trying to change people. We know they will change as the opportunity presents itself and as their will allows, but we will maintain our constancy of purpose. This is completely manifest in a transforming workplace as we move towards visuality. That's its purpose. The reason that I can be so declarative about visuality is we have a great ally, a great human ally in every single person who comes to work, and that is brain function. The fact is that 50% of the involuntary part of the human brain is dedicated to finding and interpreting visual data. That is specifically its purpose. It finds and interprets visual data, and from that it derives meaning, and then it understands the actions, okay? It is as involuntary, that mechanism, that looking for and interpreting data is as involuntary and constant as our breath and as our heartbeat. It's 50% of the involuntary brain function. This is our great ally in creating a visual workplace, and it is completely underutilized. We don't go in and patch visual devices in place that we saw elsewhere. We create them, and yeah, they might look like other people's devices, but we own it, it's our language, and we speak it and we use it. The brain transforms that data into information, that information into meaning, and from that we derive our beliefs and behaviors. This is the way to build, if you will, a coded workplace, a workplace that is tied to the work culture and to those values. Our communities are highly visual, not because they've decided to be, but because we need them to be. We are visual beings, therefore we live in a visual world. We created it, and not the other way around. Appreciate that. This is the normal state of things. Your workplace should be visual because it should be fit for humans. Brain function is what drives visuality, the development and the deployment. It is a natural, innate ability in each of us, inborn. Anyone at work possesses this brain function. Our brain was there before COVID. It was there during COVID. It is there now. I say use it. Use it. Strategically use it to transform your workplace. We just have a few slides left. When effectively implemented, Visuality creates an engaged workforce where people are working by design with autonomy, with self-leadership, self-accountability, and trust. They trust in themselves, and as they trust more and more in themselves, as you allow that, they begin to trust in you. A company cannot convert to a workplace that speaks without this direct and active involvement. It's a requirement. And there we have it, bingo. The leadership decision to engage that and the learning mindset that goes with it, Shingo principle, lead with humility. We know it's bigger than both of us. We know that we have to listen, be attentive, be responsive, be aligned. We as leaders, we lead with humility, and we allow the workforce to develop within a structure. Of course, that's what work is. It is structured outcomes. But nonetheless, this is an improvement strategy that has huge repercussions. The result is this. Here's the language of Visuality. Your operational system embedded. And yes, there are corollaries, exact corollaries, nearly exact, in offices, of course, and absolutely in hospitals. And here's the thing about it. When visual thinkers leave your company after they have converted their work area to Visuality, whether they leave voluntarily or because of the pandemic, they leave their visual legacy. That is left behind like diamonds on a necklace, like the family treasures. It's there for whoever comes next. You are leaving your intelligence in operations, on the production floor, in the office, in the form of visual devices. Here's more, a completely different set. I think we have 110,000 photographs. We have a lot. Cutting across all levels. We see senior leadership here, we see machinery, we see supervisors, we see operators, we see 350 Hijunka boxes right here at WireMold, no computer-driven, no ERP system, no computer-driven scheduling. It's all there in Hijunka and Shingo Prize-winning plant. In the language that they understand, whatever language they speak, from Polish to Italian, because Visuality is the universal language. Because of our brain function, we understand it because our eyes will understand it, and our eyes will tell our brain, okay? You're cutting right through the language barrier. Embedded performance, this happens to be the cell of Raquel. This is his cell. His need to know became other people's, and he shared it with everyone. It became other people's pull. They pulled this information when they worked on second and third shift. Fantastic, complete. A workplace that speaks. Information deficits, Rick found one. If he finds one, he gets rid of it through a visual device, eliminates both. This is a workplace fit for humans. Focus on the process. Let the process be fit for humans. Let the process speak. Building a workplace that can respond to turbulent times and remain stable requires the hearts and the minds, the creativity of the people who work there. That's how Visuality and the Shingo principles work together. It is hard to stop us from growing. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And if nothing changes, nothing changes. So, thank you.
It looks like we do have one question. We'll go ahead and ask that. And they ask, why is learning together but deployment individually?
Thank you. It's a great question. And I actually did include that sentence a little provocatively. I knew that it was a contradiction. But we learn together so that we're in the same training room, as it were. We're going through the same process. But the devices themselves come from the individual's understanding of where the struggle is, where the information deficits in his or her workplace is causing her to struggle. We find that, in a sense, that information deficit is a missing answer, and it's causing me to either leave my work area or interrupt somebody with questions or struggle in some way, break the flow of work. So we want these devices to be very particular and to serve the individual. And when we do that iteratively, when we do it, we have 30, 40 people in the training room, and then they begin the exploration of motion, moving without working, and identifying where their struggle is, where their information deficits are. We then get an explosion of visual devices that probably the next question is going to be, well, they're not standardized. Yes, they are intentionally not standardized. We don't want to standardize too soon. We want the diversity. We want the different inventions. We don't want to clamp down and make everything look the same when people are actually expressing themselves. And that is the individual expression, which is more important in this day and age, post-COVID, than it has ever been. People have to express themselves. We see it everywhere. I hope that was a good beginning answer. And I just want to say, get a couple of my books and you'll get a lot more. Lots of examples and I think good learning.
We do have another question. Randy asked, what single piece of advice would you offer for visual systems in a shipbuilding environment where spaces are tight and there are a lot of safety controls around fireproofing?
Yes, wonderful. Actually, that kind of confined environment helps to focus people's visual thinking, because the margin between, there is very little motion related to movement, except if you have to get up and leave your value field and get something that you've forgotten. So you'll do a lot of kitting. You will look for something called design to task, which is a higher form of kitting, where you will have different functions in the same kit, not just kits related to what needs to be assembled, but you'll have tools that are exactly for the task. I remember at Lockheed Martin, they had this wonderful assembly bench. Oh man, they just did extraordinary design to task applications. But the bench was designed on a freeform platform, so it was very flexible. The parts came in a foam kit, so they were all set and you could see if anything was missing. But on the lower levels of the freeform stand were dedicated, there was a dedicated PSI meter, 6 of them, because there were 6 different models that happened on that small bench. There were also dedicated drills, so that people weren't changing the bits with the likelihood or the possibility of a mistake. It was all preset, design to task. If you do that, if you just do design to task and do this other thing called store things, not air, you'll get some mileage out of that. I recommend the Yellow Book to you. Just read it, and there's a million principles and applications in there, but you'll find design to task in that one too. It's very good. I hope I answered you. Oh, and can I just say there's like 25 videos on my site, so you can get a lot of firsthand learning.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you, Mary.
We have another question from Victor. Victor asks, if we as human beings are visual, why are organizations implementing more visual devices? Is this natural for our brain?
Why aren't they, or why are they?
Why are they?
In order to satisfy the human brain function seeking for meaning, seeking to understand. Most of the time, what happens when somebody comes to a new workplace that is not visual is that they'll make friends with whoever knows the most, because there are no answers that are embedded. Nothing. What there is machinery, or there may be desks, but there's no there's no wayfinding. You know how much wayfinding is important to us at the airport. There's no wayfinding in the office. There's no way in, no way out. It's all the same. It's all beige. We're not talking neat and clean. Neat and clean is a health and safety principle, and it's important. We're talking about the information is available so that I can independently make decisions on my own, so that I can make my contribution and I can know if I'm right or wrong. That's the Poka-yoke level. So this workplace that speaks is a workplace that is putting language in place where there's zero language, zero information. It makes us very dependent, and we get grumpy when we're grown-ups and, you know, mom and pop isn't there to bail us out. We just get grumpy. We feel kind of patronized, and we feel like little children. Why do I always have to ask? You'll get a lot of, you know, pushback just because people are irritated that they even have to ask you the question that they asked you yesterday again. It's dysfunctional. It's dysfunctional. Ford just didn't think of it. He was thinking of other things. He made other contributions. Go visual and people will begin to flow, and they'll give you a donut for it. They'll really like you. It is a huge cultural change when people are treated as truly as equals, equal information. I have this lovely saying, it goes, the liberation of information is the liberation of the human will. The will says, okay, I'm yours. You've told me, now I'm going to tell you, and you get this wonderful flow. Try it, you'll love it.
Perfect. We have one last question. They ask, what should be the most foundational trait of a visual leader to enable transformation?
We have a suite called Visual Leadership, so I'm going to give you declarations. This is, you know, I've got an answer for you. The role of the leader is to decide and drive. The information that an executive, I'm talking about an executive leader, it's slightly different on a supervisory management level. You can look at the old webinar from a couple of years ago on the Shingo site on lead versus manage that will give you some information about this. But the formats that we use are the operations template, which is like the Toyota house, but much more functional, and the X-type matrix and the roadmap and the war room. Those are the 4 tools of the executive leader, and they have one purpose: to allow that leader to say yes to the few and know why, and wait to the many and know why. Not no to the many, but wait. That's the job of a leader. We are not in the realm of, is the leader politically correct? Is she sufficiently humble and to listen and coach? There are endless books on that. The other part of the leader is strength and clarity and direction, vector force, moving in a direction powerfully. And that part has been largely taken into the basement and is no longer discussed anymore. But I find it very, very useful to help leaders find their way through their strength and through the clarity that visuality gives. What visuality gives to the leader is not the emotional conversation, but a third focus, a focus outside of herself, where she can focus and determine what she wants. And we say to leaders, tell me what you want. And I want a sentence that begins with, I want. And you'll get, everything will drop away. And if you can get that person to just say what they want, man, they're going to say it and it's going to be bingo. That's what they want to own. And you can move in that direction. And, you know, people are good people. They want good things. It's not going to be weird. It's going to be a direction that is close to their heart and that they want to attach their heart and their will to, and their energy. So that's what we do. That's what's important, to decide and drive, to decide. It comes from the Latin meaning to cut into two, to make one thing into two, so you can see the opposites and you can weigh which one you want. That kind of discussion. It's wonderful.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Gwen. That's all the questions that we have today. Thank you so much for all the attendees for joining. I hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to check out our YouTube channel. You can watch that webinar that Gwen was referring to earlier. So thank you, and we'll see you again next month. Thank you.
Bye-bye.